And so I'll read them to you now before we start the message. It's in my Bible, there's a little subheading that's called Two Covenants. And of course, that's a make put in thing there. That's not chapter 21, verse 21. Tell me, you who desire to be under the law, do you not hear the law? For it is written that Abraham had two sons, the one woman, the other by a free woman. But he who was of the bondwoman was born according to the flesh, free woman through promise. Symbolic. For these are the two covenants, the one from Mount Sinai, the bondage, which is Hagar. For this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and correspond which now is in bondage with Children. But the Jerusalem above is free, which is the mother of us all. For it is written, rejoice, O barren, you who do not bear. Break forth and shout, you who are not in labor. Desolate has many more children than she has as a husband. Now we, brethren, as Isaac was, are children of promise. But as he who was born according to the flesh then persecuted him who was born according to the Spirit, even so it is now. Nevertheless, what does the Scripture say? Cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be heir with that of the free woman. So then, brethren, we are not children of the bond of the free. So I can just want to start out by saying that this should have been the happiest time in his life. His son had made it through infancy, and it had been the most glorious, grandest, happiest day that he had. Having survived this infancy, his son was finally weaned, and that called for a huge back then in those days. Now, there were two milestones in the life of every child. The first took place 8 days after his parents performed the rite of circumcision. And it says in here, although this was painful to parents of child, that reminds me that my dad say, now, son, this is going to hurt me worse than it's going to hurt you. And I would say, yeah, Dad, right. I want to cry like I am. Milestones. People dedicated to God as he was circumcised. The second milestone was not out of dedication, but was out of delight, as the parents gave a feast at the time that their child was weaned. So it was that on the day that Isaac was weaned, his old man was no doubt found proud as punch. Now you might think that I'm being a little bit disrespectful by referring to Isaac's father as his old man. But in every respect, it's a question to me of reality. See, when we first met Isaac's dad, he was already 75 years old. A Mesopotamian town called Ur. And just for your information, Ur was an upscale town, and every time you take a bath now, you're going to have to think about Abraham, because Ur was famous for development.
For what?
Although the moon goddess, Abraham was in the beginning, and was commonly worshipped in that, found in Joshua verse 2. God spoke to him, said to him, get thee out and away from the kindred into a land that bless them that bless thee. And I will make thy name great, and I will bless them that bless thee, and I will curse them that curse thee. And in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. That's found in Genesis 12, verses 1 through 3. Now, if you're 75 years or older, like I am, or if you're just senior citizen, or if you're retired, don't ever think that God is through with you yet, because he's not.
No, sir.
You never know. God is going to whisper in your ear something of or a greater ministry, just as he did to Abram. Abram was 75 years old. Abram did indeed leave Ur, and he traveled northwest to a little town of him, where he stayed until his father died. Then he journeyed southwest to the land God was leading him, which was the land of Canaan. When he arrived, he looked around. He pitched it, and he built an altar for it. But then something happened. Famine came. Got pretty tough. So Abraham said to those who have to leave this land, there's plenty. So they left the promise, and they journeyed south to Egypt, where upon their arrival, Abram came to the conclusion that because of his wife's great beauty, Pharaoh would consider wanting her into his great harem. And so he came up with this plan. He said to her, "We'll tell him that you are my sister, because if he thinks that you're my wife and you're so beautiful and he wants you in his harem, he's going to kill me for going to take you into his harem." And sure enough, from Pharaoh came out looking around, and they saw Sarah and saw how beautiful that she was. And they went back and told Pharaoh, and Pharaoh said, "Go and bring her to me." And they said, "Well, she's his sister." Pharaoh said, that's perfect. Just bring her to me, please." So they did. They went and they got Sarai, and they brought her back to Pharaoh. And you know what happened?
Yeah, I know.
On that first night, that taken Sarai into his harem, God caused the plagues to come across the land. And it was so intense, Pharaoh recognized that this word of God that was speaking to him. And so, and he had been tricked by Abram, the next Pharaoh rebuked him and sent Sir and Abram back to Bethel. Now I found interesting that there is no record at all. You look to the scriptures, you will any record of where God spoke to Abraham in Egypt. I keep saying Abraham, I'm sorry, Abram. He wasn't Abraham yet. God did not speak to Abram, Egypt. You're not where you're supposed to be, doing what you were called to do, or being what you were called to be. Don't expect the Lord to speak to you in Egypt. He loves you too much. If he spoke to you while you were in Egypt, you'd probably settle down there, and that would be disastrous for you and for your family. God shouts loudly through his silence. Whenever you're in Egypt, until we finally say, let's go back to the house of God, the people of God, the place of God. Now, when the Lord spoke to Abram, the second saying, "I am your exceeding great reward and shield." That's Genesis 15:1. Abram replied, "Lord, my reward, but I still don't have any children. God said, Abram, look up at the stars. As many as you see the stars in the heavens, your seed shall be them. And because Abram believed God, God declared him righteous. That's Galatians chapter 3, verse 6. But the years went by. Nothing happened. Abram still didn't have children. Finally, at 7 of age, Sarai said to her 86-year-old husband, Abram was 10 years older than. She said, I know God told you that you would be a great nation. I know he showed you the stars in the heavens. But the time has come to get your head out of the cloud and to get your feet on the ground. Abram, take my handmaiden. Have relations with her, and the as ours. So Abram listened unto the voice of his wife, and the child that was born was named Ishmael. Now 13 years later, which puts Abram at about 99, Abram again saying, you're no longer going to be called Abram, or exalted father. Abram meant exalted father. From this time on, your name will be Abraham, or the father of multitudes. Great. Abraham must have thought, I only have one child. Now, it was bad being called exalted father, but the father of multitudes, only one child? Then why do you suppose God changed Abraham's name and Sarah? Anybody want to venture?
Because he knew what was fixing to happen.
Tell.
He knew what was coming.
Well, you know what? In the letter H is letter, and it stands for grace. So when God changed Sarai's name, he inserted grace in. And when he Abram's name to Abraham, he made Abraham a man of grace. I thought that was really very, very interesting. But elated to be parents, Abraham, now I'm going to start the other way. Abraham and Sarah named their baby Isaac, or laughter. And they must have been as proud parents could be to watch their long-awaited son pass from infancy into childhood. The celebration commemorating weaning must have been a joyous occasion indeed, until Ishmael, a teenager at this point, resenting the attention that was given to Isaac, started acting up, and he began teasing Isaac, and he began making fun of him, and he just started making his little brother feel bad. So, as Sarah observed Ishmael's taunts and jeers, she implored Abraham to cast Hagar and Ishmael out. And once again, Abraham hearkened unto the voice of his wife, thus time being instructed by God to do so. This time being instructed by God to do so. That's Genesis 22, verse 12. Now, although Scripture records that the thought of casting out his son was very grievous in his sight, Abraham was the one who had learned to obey the Lord, whether or not he agreed intellectually, and regardless of whether he was in harmony emotionally. Abraham is the greatest example of faith in the Old Testament simply because he did what God
He's supposed
said,
to be in bed.
even when he didn't understand or he couldn't agree. So it was with a broken heart that Abraham filled water skins for Hagar and Ishmael, and he sent them out into the desert. Which brings us at last to our text. You see, every Testament principle has an Old Testament picture. And justification by faith, as outlined here in Galatians, is no exception. Consider the picture perfect allegory. Hagar, the law. Ishmael, Abraham's attempt to help God out,
We'll find it.
represents the flesh. Sarah
I love you.
represents grace. Legalism will always persecute the person who is living in grace and enjoying the free gift of salvation, just as Ishmael taunted Isaac. Those who are trying to be religious mock those who celebrate liberty in Jesus, calling them shallow, immature, and undisciplined. You will find this to be true. Well, those around you, but a voice will well up within you saying, look what you're doing. Real Christians don't do that. You must not be a real Christian. And finally, Satan himself, a voice from underneath you, will condemn you day and night. That's Revelation 12, verse 10. Now, contrary to our natural inclinations, the solution to all of these accusations is not to get more religious. You try harder now, you try more, you vow more earnestly, or you work more diligently. No, that's not the solution. The solution is to cast out the bondwoman. The solution is to say, away rules and regulations, religion and tradition. I'm not going to try and deal with or compromise with the bondswoman. I'm going to cast her out. Now, my mind, in a sense, rebels against that. My heart wonders about that. And I'm tempted to think the best way to help people in any church family is to set up some rules and restrictions, to set up certain standards of spirituality, to draw up pledges for them to sign, commitments for them to make, promises for them to keep. But the book of Galatians says just the opposite. Get rid of all the promises. Get rid of the pledges. Get rid of the commitments and the restrictions and the rules. Those are all Ishmaels. They're an attempt to help God their own ability. But they will come back and they will persecute you because inevitably and invariably we'll hedge on our commitments, we'll break our promises, and we'll be unable to keep our rules. Then we'll be down on ourselves. We'll get depressed about ourselves. We'll get disgusted with ourselves until at last we'll say, oh, forget it. Why should we even bother walking with God? I just can't do it. It's just too hard. So cast out Hagar and Ishmael on the other hand, and what will happen? You will cleave only to Sarah. And what does that mean? You cleave to grace. And when you realize that the work is done, the price has been fully paid, you'll exchange that legalistic relationship that you once had with relationship with Him. See, if I truly love God, I won't be attracted to the places and the activities of those who don't care about Him.
Amen.
Now, let's just take an example. The reason that I don't go to bars is not because God tells me, thou shalt not go to bars. The reason I don't go to bars is because I don't see myself sitting in a dark room with the day passing me by, drinking, when I could be outside in the sunshine, kicking a soccer ball with my grandson. Or I could be having a meal with my granddaughter. Or as I was talking with Jana earlier tonight, I could be sitting here listening to music while my daughter does phone sessions in my bedroom on my phone.